Tuesday, March 23rd to order. Sir, would you call the roll?
Yes, sir. Justice Ash,
Here.
Justice Byrd, Justice Quorum,
Yo.
Justice Fleeman, Justice Hinton,
Here.
Justice Hepler,
Here.
Justice Jackson, Justice Van Gatt,
Here.
Justice McClanahan,
Here.
Justice McDonald,
Here.
Justice White.
Here.
The first item on the agenda is a presentation by Shep Russell. Before Mr. Russell comes forward, Cliff, would you introduce Mr. Russell for us?
Yes, Mr. Russell is with the Friday Law Firm. I believe he's the senior partner. He has been the guide for Mississippi County, for both the county and the Great River Foundation for over 20 years throughout the entire life of the half-cent economic development sales tax. He's drafted our resolutions. He's been a tremendous help to me in telling us what we can do and what we can't do. And of course, he's here tonight at the request of the justices to give a brief overview of what can be done with economic development taxes such as ours. Yes, sir.
You mind if I take this off and
Absolutely.
speak?
Yeah, oh, sure.
Thank you for having me tonight. I have had a long history with the county and the municipalities here, and always look forward to the opportunity to come visit. In 2003, we adopted this tax, and it's for economic development. And the ballot on there said economic development means funding, promoting, and providing of economic development purposes and economic development projects to stimulate the local economy and to support the creation of private sector job opportunities. So the Quorum Court at the time passed an ordinance levying the tax with that language in there, but that's what the tax was to be used for. It was put before the voters, and in 2003, put that language on the ballot, and that's what the purpose of the tax is. Tax was extended for 10 years, and at that time, it was just voted on as an extension of the existing tax. In other words, the purpose in the ballot language was not changed. Cliff asked me what the limitations were on how the money could be spent, if there were any constitutional limitations. The statutes really don't address this, so this is up to the courts to interpret whether money is spent for economic development purposes is really being spent for that purpose. The two constitutional restrictions that you have is that one constitutional provision says a tax levied for one purpose shall not be used for any other purpose. So there's no discretion legally for the county to use the money for any other purpose other than economic development purposes. The city of Little Rock proposed, I think it was 1971, we have a constitutional amendment that lets you levy a property tax and issue bonds against that for industrial development. It says for industrial development purposes. And it was either a test case or a real live case where the city had proposed to have the bonds and the tax paid for like about 8 different purposes. And one was off-street parking, park and rec, streets, those type of purposes. And then several were barge, river terminal down there on the Arkansas River, and a convention center. And so the Supreme Court had a chance to analyze this case. Now, when you're trying to decide what is economic development, it's all based on the facts. It's all everything is fact driven about what is. But in this particular case, and I think the reason I'm bringing it up, it's got a general premise. Everything is not economic development. And everything you do is not that. That's what the city of Little Rock was asking. We'll make our city more attractive, and if we make it more attractive, surely people, industry, companies would want to locate in Little Rock. I said, no, it's got to have a nexus. And what the court used in that particular case is a direct connection to attracting an industry into the city of Little Rock in that case. So that when you're trying to decide what can the money be used for, it needs to be for a direct job opportunity. Now, let's say that you had an industry, a company, or an employer, or something that was going to generate the purposes of the ballot. And the industry company said, well, if you do this amenity, and this amenity, we'll sign a contract, we'll come, we'll employ 100 people, whatever. You know, that is the kind of direct nexus that can let you do things that are not necessarily directly related to land and building and that type of thing. Because historically here, to my knowledge, primarily that has been with companies coming in and helping them with land or building, that type of thing. Now, you say, okay, well, what if we make the wrong decision and we spend the money for economic development, and it turns out that economic development to all of you means one thing, but to all other, let's say, judges, reasonable people, what have you, it's not. And so what happens? What's the downside? Well, the downside is that a taxpayer could bring a suit basically asking that the general fund pay the economic development fund back the money. That's the remedy. So in other words, there is a downside, because then you're having to take county general and spending it to replace the money that was spent for maybe a purpose that really wasn't economic development. So that's one constitutional provision. Tax levied for one purpose can't be used for any other purpose. Now, the second constitutional restriction has to do with appropriating money for a corporation, association, institution, individual, where you're appropriating money for that person without getting a service or something in return. And so when you're spending your tax money, predominantly, you've been spending the money on a tangible asset that the county can own at least for some period of time. Maybe you're leasing it to a company, maybe you bought land, something like that. You're not writing the company usually a check where you're appropriating the money where they can then buy the land or do whatever they say they're going to do. This was turning out to be a problem here in our state, because we compete with surrounding states to locate industry, businesses in our state. And so the voters in 2016 approved a change of this constitutional restriction so that in certain cases you can appropriate money directly to a person for certain economic development projects. And the projects, though, manufacturing, production, industry, research, technology and development, recycling, distribution centers, call centers, warehouse facilities, job training, regional or national corporate headquarters, and then certain types of sports complexes. So that the Constitution now, the prohibition against appropriating money to a private person, now that there are exceptions to that you can go through to actually hand over the money, and then you're supposed to have a contract with whoever the recipient is. There's a statute that you need to comply with, but basically there needs to be a clawback where if the jobs or whatever is not realized, whatever you've agreed to, that this entity is supposed to pay the money back. It's supposed to have a certain length of time that's restricted by the statute for all of this to happen. And so that you're not using your money and then it's not being spent, it's gone, basically. So they've got a certain amount of time to use the money. You need to be doing, if it's over $100,000, and if you are giving the money to this entity, then you need to do a cost, economic impact, cost benefit analysis to make sure that you're getting back what in dollars is it worth making this investment. So that previous to this, really what you had to do is you had to have ownership, at least for a period of time. So, because the county couldn't appropriate money to an industry, but it could provide capital assets that the county would own and lease to that industry. Maybe it was for a nominal amount of money, but that seemed to be the reasonable thing to do. So now, if for some reason you made a grant that wasn't for one of these purposes, you run that same risk of a taxpayer suit to have the money, the general fund, put the money back in the economic development fund. So that's the downside. So I know that over the years there's been a lot of questions because Cliff calls a lot about with different scenarios. And the thing is that but for this particular case, there's not anything a lawyer can really touch on. You just have to, try and use common sense and, here's what the law says. Here's this set of facts. How would you apply it, any of you or me as a lawyer, to tell you what your limitations are. So it's not that easy. So Cliff is called often. We kind of talk about the pros and cons, and ultimately, somebody's group's got to make the decision about whether this fits economic development. So sometimes it's in the eye of the beholder, and so what we say at our firm is when we're talking about sometimes what we're working on, that that's why I said we'll convince ourselves that it sounds like it's correct, but it's when you're just talking amongst yourselves, you can convince yourself you're right. But sometimes that doesn't turn out to be the case. Others don't agree with it. So it's good to have a good factual determination and really ask yourself, is this what the voters have approved? And is this economic development directly? So I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have. hope you'll have something, because I've driven here and want to make sure that you're not scratching your head, and after I leave, what did he say? You know, so,
Any questions?
Could you talk to him about the lights and Blythe?
Well, that'd be a good question.
Mr. Russell, I'm not from Blythe, I'm from Manila, but one of the big questions that has brought you here tonight involves the city of Blythe. There's two Interstate 55 exits at the city of Blythe. One of them had reasonable lighting at the exit where people would get off and enter into the city. But those lights have become unusable. They don't function anymore. It's going to be quite expensive for the city of Blythe to repair them. Over $100,000. I don't know the exact dollar, but I do know it's 6 figures. And they've asked for help. And so some of our JPs feel like that maybe we could use some economic development money, because it would light up the exit and make people feel more safe and secure in coming into the city. And so that's one of those realms
that a little bit sounds like the case I was talking to you about, where they're talking about, you know, having some general improvements. You know, if there was an intersection and somebody said we would come in and build this store or whatever, and we're going to employ some people, remember, private sector job opportunities, then, you know, that might be okay, because you're tying it into, if we do this, you're going to do that, but without something that says, you know, that this is directly going to.
you'd have to have a direct link to a specific business or industry that would have a direct link to a certain number of jobs.
I think that's what it's getting at. It's not getting at just general improvements for a city. Now, I do work for the city of Blythe, so
I'm not trying to put you in a bad spot.
no,
This is
I
just
mean,
concept.
so I'm all for.
Well, we all are.
The thing is, and I'm in organizations and deal with things just like you are. You got money, and I've been some where we got money, and everybody's trying to figure out a way if they qualify for the money, and maybe that's they're trying to figure out how to make it economic development. Just as you describe it, you know, it doesn't sound that way to me, but there could be other facts that.
I'm Rick Ash, and I work for the city of Blythe, and I am one of them that is very much for helping. I'm not one to pay the whole thing. But one of the reasons is a lot of our industry, and one of them that we're actually putting money into now, are complaining that their people can't see to get off. Their truckers have trouble when they get off because of the way that a lot of those exits are made. If you don't go a certain way, then you got to fight all the oncoming traffic. And if they had lights up where they could see, it would help them to get their product better. That's what they're bringing to us.
Right.
So in that fashion, and we've got other industry or these are more along the line of, we've got a new restaurant looking at us. I know that because I'm the city building inspector. And they're wanting to go right at one of those intersections. So they're doing their feasibility studies right now. They're going to be in there to look at the city. But the other businesses located in the area are saying, you know, people say, I almost didn't get off here. It's so dark I couldn't see anything.
Right. Well, even though I'm only talking about this particular pot of money, it sounds like the city does need to fix that lighting. I guess if you had a situation where they all said they were closing, for instance, because there is the concept of retention of employment, you know, and able to, you know, you don't want that intersection, not to have the services and then the jobs and the economic activity that's there. But let me, I promise you that I'm just one person, and it's whatever the consensus is on whether this fits within that would be important. I'm not sure for me, unless these companies said we're stop, that this pot of money is not necessarily the right place to fund that, but I have not spoken to the mayor about it. He may have, like you, may have some other facts, but.
You typically consider this a little bit of a stretch, though, is the way I'm hearing? For us to take economic development from the county and utilize on this particular lighting situation?
I would consider it a stretch.
Okay.
Absent additional facts that may come to light that might convince a court that this was the proper expenditure in order to save jobs.
I'm not at all against this. I just don't want the county to get in trouble.
Right. Well, it's all if the interchange, if you had a study or something like that that said, we're going to do an interchange, and if we have this, that, it's going to bring 3-4 businesses, something like that is a possibility.
Is it possible that maybe part of the gray issue is the measurability? Is because that whole, if you build it, they'll come kind of thing, you can't measure that, you're just guessing, but after the fact, so your first point is, worst case scenario, we did that, someone complained, we lost a case, we would have to move the money back. So that's worst case scenario. But in that time frame, if that was happening, if 3 new businesses decided to open up on that interstate and they chose to say that they chose that location because then at that point you have measurability, right? That was a direct economic development builder.
That could be. That could be. Usually you look at things before it's done as to what facts did you all rely on but you're right. I mean, human nature is, well, look what happened when we did it. Surely it was okay. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Harvons. I'm from Osceola, District 9. One of the questions I have, and I know I get this asked a lot, is for economic development. I know we use it for the industrials and stuff like that, and we need quality of life things to be brought to this county. How can we use economic funds for quality of life developments here, like businesses? How does that play a part?
Yeah, I agree. We need quality of life to have companies want to bring their people in to live there and have a job. But I don't know that if it's levied for economic development purposes and for job creation to stimulate the economy, without having somebody that said, we're going to come, if you build that park, think about a park. I mean, you don't have any of these, but if you invest in these things, we will come and employ, and that may
Because a lot of it is the industrials are here, right? But for people to stay here, they need quality of life, and people are moving there. They work here, yes. These companies have jobs for them, but they all live outside of the county. So if we had things for quality of life, they would probably live here too, because I have kids. If I work in one of these steel mills, I want to live in Marion or Jonesboro or Memphis because they have all the things for my kids to do. So I think we really need to start focusing on stuff for quality of life, because that's what's going to bring the people to live in this county.
Right. I don't disagree with you. The question again, though, all that's important. The question is, can you use an economic development tax for that? You know, obviously, the county, the cities have tax revenues. They can spend it on things like that and may need to. The question is, this pot of money for economic development purposes. It sounds like it fits in this case, that where it's, you know, it makes the city or the county or community more attractive. And because we're more attractive and have these amenities, people will come. And it's just a question of what pot of money is going to pay for this. I agree with you, it's needed, but can you pay for it out of this type of tax, I guess is what.
I have a question from Justice McDonald. The terminology, economic development, is there any way if it, something like community economic development would speak sort of speaking to the things that Justice Harbon spoke about? Is that anywhere in that definition that would have?
Yeah, I'm hard to hear.
Community, I was saying, is that definition community development? Is it any community economic development? Is it anywhere in that definition of economic development? Is it somewhere in there so we can do some of the quality of life things?
What, the way this tax is right now, I'd say no. But, I mean, you know, as you know, the county's got a tax going through the courthouse and the hospital. I mean, it depends on how it's voted. And right now, with for economic development, you know, it's just that everything can't be economic development. Everything can't be. I think it's, now, I would take your case. I'd go to the Supreme Court and see. I would argue for you if you want, but I wouldn't think you'd have a lot of success.
So the standard measurability for economic development is job creation, correct?
That's correct.
So if it was a quality
or job retention.
So if it was a quality of life type of business that created jobs, then that could fall into that category?
Yeah,
because there's no number of jobs that it has to create, right? There's no minimum number of jobs that it has to create to meet that.
There's nothing in the statute about a minimum number. It's whatever the group thinks is a sufficient amount of jobs to make it worth your investment in whatever a capital project is. So, yeah.
Because any quality of life things that you're going to put like a business or something, it is going to create jobs. You know, because to run let's just say amusement park, you need employees there. That's giving jobs, right? We're creating jobs. For example, I'm just throwing this out there. Like you said, parks, but I'm saying, what if an amusement park? I'm just using it as an example. That creates jobs. It will bring people to this county. Things like that. Would that be under economic development? Would that be considered?
That would be economic development. Now, how you put the tax in, it doesn't fall within just giving them the money, but there are things you could do to make that happen. That would be, because it's directly creating the jobs. And like Magic Springs, we had a bond issue for Magic Springs back in the 70s when it started. And tourism, there's certain types of projects that are, create a lot of jobs, payrolls.
But was that bond issue an economic development bond issue that did the Magic Springs project?
It was back at that, it was a tourism revenue bond. A tourism revenue bond, which there's a statute that, but the justification, it was bringing in people to spend money there in Hot Springs. And, it's had trouble over the years, been like, it's got a roller coaster there, and that park's been like a roller coaster itself. I sometimes have called it Tragic Springs there. You know, but
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
oh, you're welcome. Good to be here.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. No more questions or comments. We'll move to the next item on the agenda, and that's the approval of minutes.
Judge, I'll make a motion that we dispense with the reading of the minutes since everyone has been provided with copies.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, and that's the treasurer's report. Steve, do you have a report for us?
I do. The interest rate today on a $100,000 CD is 0.55, and that is still at the First National Bank of Eastern Arkansas in Osceola, $100,000 for 1 year. And you have your sales tax report in front of you, and it was really good, what we received in February. It was the highest that it's been in 10 years, as you can see on your report, so that was really good. I don't know what it's gonna be this month. We'll have to, we'll get it later on this week. And on your fund balance report that you have, that is as of today, you will see there are a few entities in the red, and that is because every year at this time, we have to do an adjustment to the final settlement because the final expenses are in. We have to do an adjustment to the final settlement, excuse me. And some entities, we had to take some money away from them and give back to county general. So a few of them didn't have enough money. So they were in the red at the end of the month. So they'll be back in the black next month.
Any questions for Ms. Smith? Thank you. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, and that's the committee reports. Justice Ash, you have a report from the Personnel Committee?
Yes, Judge. We had a couple of issues we discussed. One was clarification on the road department pay when there was inclement weather. What we did was we straightened that out. The employees are going to be paid for every hour they work. Now, part of that may be comp time. If they worked overtime, they would get comp time at time and a half, because that's what federal law says we have to do. But on those days when you close the courthouses, they will get 8 hours of comp time to take at a later date. And it is just hour for hour, just a 8 hour, because that's their normal work day. If they only worked 4 hours that day, they would only get 4 hours pay, but they would still get 8 hours of comp time because of closing courthouses. Their time sheets, they will only fill out their actual hours worked. The finance department will take care of putting in their comp time and figuring out if there's overtime and giving them that. The other thing we discussed was the OEM slot. They need a deputy. Believe that Wayne has talked with you about who would like to fill that position, and we're looking at how we're going to fund that right at the moment. We'll be working with finance on that. I'll take any questions.
With no questions or comments for Justice Ash, we'll move to the next item on the committee reports, the Fire, Police, and Safety Committee. Justice Ash.
Yes, Your Honor. We discussed that we had eliminated the 911 coordinator's position. It was combined with the OEM office. Talked about the deputy position again there in police and fire. We also looked at the safety plan that Wayne has updated. This is due to the fact that our workman's comp basically looks at us and says, you need to do these things, it'll help you reduce your workman's comp rate. The biggest thing in there was a change in where we want to create light duty for people that are injured that they can't perform their regular duties, but they can come in and answer a phone or do something like that. That way it reduces our lost time injuries and thus helps lower those rates. The full thing, I believe, will be attached with a resolution that you'll see earlier or later to adopt that. We had planned to talk with the sheriff's office about turnkey health, but they had one of the turnkey employees got quarantined, so they couldn't be there for the meeting, so we decided we would move that. And Justice White brought up that the Act 833 monies, there are some entities that are concerned they're not getting their fair share. We've asked Wayne to check into that, look at it, and see what's going on with that, and see if we need to make some adoptions or some corrections to that. I'll take any questions on that.
I got a question, but not on that. Is the ambulance service under fire, police, and safety, or are we completely out of the ambulance service?
We
Business and
contracted out,
contract.
but I would think that item will certainly fall under that committee.
I got a lot of complaints. The southernmost ambulance is at OCO. Response time to Wilson is 15 to 25 minutes. That leaves Bassett, Joyner, and a community at Birdsong is predominantly post-retirement age without really any response from our ambulance service. And their mayor called me and asked me about it, and I said I didn't know exactly whether we contracted privately with Pafford or what the situation does. We need to look at the coverage of our ambulance service for all of our people.
I think that's a good idea.
I didn't know where to go with that.
Ms. George, would you furnish Justice Cullen with that contract, and I'll be glad to spend some time with you and share what I know about it.
We're going to be having a police and fire committee meeting also with turnkey. We could, at that point, if you'd like to, we could contact Pafford and ask them to attend the meeting and discuss this with them.
I think that'd be a good idea.
Are we doing anything to extend the training of the first responders?
Usually your fire departments are handling that. Not all of them do, but most of the fire departments are training first responders, and a lot of times they will go out prior to the ambulance being there. I can't speak for all the departments. I know that the ones up around where I live and work and everything, they do. But it's, I'm not gonna say that's countywide. Maybe that's something else that we could ask the fire chiefs to look at.
That's our salvation in my part of the county, is first responders. Really is.
I think we can look
Thank
into
you. I know where
that.
to go now with that question.
I think we can look into that at that committee meeting and explore what's available to us and for additional training. Any other questions for fire, police, and safety? Thank you, Justice Ash. Justice Jackson is not here tonight. Do we have someone from interviewing property that can give us an update?
Yes, sir.
Jackson?
I think I'll just stand up for a while tonight, sir. Justice Jackson contacted me yesterday, said she'd be out of town, asked if I would give her a report tonight. Our budget on the courthouse renovation in Blytheville is tracking really well. We still have $200,000 contingency fund, but that's for things that we find that we weren't planning on. The Osceola roof project came in at around $2,042,224. We had committed $2 million to that. So we went over a little bit, but we had interest money that was off of the checking account and the CDs that we use that will help cover that. We still have $528,250.90 in undesignated funds. A change order came through some millwork, added partitions, and so it took a little bit of that, but I think we're gonna be good on that project. Our desk and furniture equipment price really helped us out a lot. I think we allotted 750,000 and we're down to 573, 574 right in that area. And we put in 125,000 for anticipated moving expenses to move us from Burdette back to Blythe. Aaron was also at the meeting and discussed with us about a possible change order for the Osceola courthouse. This would be an additional $228,000 to repair terracotta and redo some glazing. He explained that water runs off into a little trough and then goes to the downspouts. And the problem is, if we don't fix those, we're going to continue to get water in the building. I think, as we all noticed, there was some damage in the courtroom a couple of weeks ago when we were down there. We really need to get that water stopped so that we don't continue to get damaged. There was something about monies being spent last year that we didn't have as much as we thought, so we pulled the ordinance for tonight. The money's still there to do it. We'll just move it around later. We also allotted $30,000 to look at dealing with the pigeon issue at that courthouse. The sheriff is looking at metal detectors. Mr. Ruby and him are supposed to get together to discuss those. Homeland Security may give them some better ideas. And it looks like Judge interjected that we're looking at a mid-September finish date on the courthouse right at the moment. We're hoping, keeping our fingers crossed that nothing else slows us down. And I'll take any questions.
It's been brought up, and I am not capable at all of answering this. Some people in construction at Osceola have questioned the work on the dome and the reuse of previous material, and I think they're relating to the copper. So I'm talking about something I know nothing about, but the question is, who is overseeing the dome work for us? Not just the contractor, do we have an inspector that's looking at that?
Yes, sir. We have two people involved. We have Aaron Ruby, he is our architect.
Okay.
And we also have, and somebody will have to help me with the name.
Porter Brown.
Porter Browning. He is a engineer from Paragould that is over here, and he is also looking at everything and helping negotiate any issues. I don't know why they think that copper was reused, because it's
I have no
a completely
idea.
new copper dome.
I'm just repeating a question that was asked of me.
I understand. I get those questions all the time, but they actually took part of this off, took it to Pennsylvania to be able to replicate what was there so they could put it back. So, and part of the reason it was more than what we had anticipated is they found damage underneath it. Apparently that courthouse has been on fire in the attic before, and they had to redo some of the structural and the decking. So, like I say, all I know is that we are being told, and Mr. Ruby is on top of that it was completely replaced. Matter of fact, we have one of the copper pieces sitting in the annex building, if anybody wants to see it.
Now add to that, we've got all of the copper that's come off of that dome. The county has it stored under lock and key right now.
Judge,
Yes.
he can't hear you, so I'm fixing to repeat it.
All right.
We've got all the copper dome that was taken off in storage.
Good. He knows
And I'd be
where
glad, Justice Cullum, keep trying to call you Dr. Cullum. I'll be glad to take you out there and show you that, and show you where it's at.
I'm just repeating questions that I was totally incapable of answering.
And while we're talking about that issue too, I was gonna wait until later on in the meeting tonight, but I've also got some phone calls over the copper already losing a lot of its shine. And I contacted Renaissance and asked them to issue a statement for that, if we need to clean it or if we need to do something to try to preserve that shine from the copper. And also contacted Aaron Ruby, asked him to issue a statement. Mr. Savage is gonna have that, is it already up?
No, it's not up, it's ready for you to look over.
So we're gonna be issuing those two statements to the public, and what they say, in essence, is, and this is coming from the project manager from Renaissance, says, concerning the copper dome in Osceola and the color it has turned, there is no issues with the material or workmanship. Our experience is that air quality from the steel mills, the coal yards, dust in the air from farm fields, and the spraying of farm fields with chemicals can make the copper patina move at a faster rate. And then he asked that we contact him if we have any further questions. Mr. Ruby answered in the same manner, and he backed it up with some material that we'll have out on our media sites. So it's not stay shiny as long as we had hoped, which we knew. And I was told at the very beginning it'd be a matter of weeks or months, and it would begin to tarnish, and it has tarnished faster. Now, in Mr. Ruby's statement, he said it could be washed off. It'd be very expensive, and his opinion was that it may not last but weeks. He also provided some information that it could be treated with a property that would seal it and keep it from turning. He said that he has looked into that, and the places that they have done that in the past did not work out well. And if it did work out well, the chemical would have to be applied every year, which would be another great expense, because you'd have to scaffold the thing again. So, but I'll be looking for any comments or information from this body or from the public that if we can do something to help that, I'd be all for it.
Judge, I also got some calls, just like Dr. Quorum did too, the same thing, that they did say that it just looks like they took it down, maybe repaired it and put the old one back. Maybe, like you said, they tried to do the replica, and it, you know, I mean, maybe they tried to match it too, because the building is a historic, but it does look like it was just taken down and repaired and put back. So I had those same questions too, was it a new one, or did they just repair it and put it up too, so.
With what he's just said, that
Yeah.
kind of explains why people would think that, because
Yeah.
it looks like it's patinaing too quickly.
Right.
I've noticed, where I go to church at, we have some copper on it, and I've noticed that when we replace it within a year, it matches the old that has been there for 50 years almost.
I think the people are just shocked because the scaffolding just came down this week or last week, and they're seeing the same thing as, like, you know, they can see it more than with the scaffolding on there. So now that they've taken it off, they're seeing more of it, and that's their concern, is just they're noticing that. I mean, we need to tell them that information.
Right.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Justice Ash.
Yes, sir.
If not, we'll move to the Finance Committee. Justice White, do you have a report?
Yes, sir, and I'll try to be brief.
You'll try, I'm sorry, you'll try to.
I'll try to be brief. We move this along. We started out the meeting talking about the monthly expenses and how every elected official and every department head was doing a good job of maintaining their departments in under budget. Then we brought up the fact that it's time for us to do our annual cleanup budget, which will clean up the 2020 budget process It's a process we go through every year, and you'll see an ordinance on the cleanup budget presented to you tonight. We talked about a mental health grant that is being administered through the county, the sheriff's department and the finance department. And in that mental health grant, there is a provision that people that administer are responsible for administering the funds are to be paid. And that is Kelly Jones and Bo McCollum. Bo has drawn some of his money last year in 2020. Kelly hasn't drawn any yet, but they need to go ahead and draw their funds that are their due out of that grant fund. We talked about a workman's comp issue that we had in the juvenile and intake office where a young lady had been hurt, an employee had been hurt 3 years ago, and workman's comp had taken care of the immediate injuries that she suffered, but here 3 years later, she's still suffering some consequences from that. Workman's comp has denied a recent claim of hers because it's after a 2-year expiration period. It's a little over $3,000. The Finance Committee thought that it would be prudent for us, the county, to take care of that county employee's bills. In return, we request a letter of release, so that will be the last of the claims for this particular employee in this particular incident. We talked a little bit about the 911 slot. Wayne has graciously accepted some additional responsibilities. We've tried to adjust the pay, but the responsibilities are going to bring the demands for more time. We don't have an overtime slot in the budget, and we want to address that. Then Sheriff Cook was there. He wanted to talk a little bit about the security systems that are being looked at for implementation in the renovation project in the Blytheville Courthouse, the different possibilities and the input that he'd like to have for his department. After the meeting was over, I think some of them were going over to look at the courthouse from the sheriff's department and see exactly what we were talking about. Then we discussed just briefly that the Finance Committee and the Quorum Court would like to look at some salary adjustments on some of the lower portions of the Jessup program. Some of our employees are actually not only in the first quartile, but a few are actually below the minimum quartile. And we'd like to make some soon adjustments outside of the normal bonus or raise period that we have, and we're beginning to look at those numbers. Then the judge wanted to talk to us. Well, actually it was Stephen. Mr. Savage talked to us a little bit about county transparency and some of the projects that he's been working on and how we are improving county transparency. The jumps that we've made in our state position from near the bottom of being one of the least transparent counties to near the top of being one of the most transparent counties. The judge is going to have 2 ordinances that he'd like to present to us tonight, and we'll see those in our agenda. And then we just mentioned that we'd be all here, gathered here tonight at the Burdette Courthouse.
Any questions for Justice White? Comments? No, thank you, Justice White. We'll move on to our new business. The next item on the agenda is the support of the sales tax. Ms. Clerk, would you read it?
Resolution number R 2021-02. A resolution to extend the 5% sales tax and use tax within Mississippi County, Arkansas, levied thereby for economic development purposes and prescribing other matters relating thereto. Whereas pursuant to ordinance number O-2003-6, adopted March 25th, 2003, ordinance number O-2003-6, and an election held on April 29th, 2003. Mississippi County, Arkansas has levied a countywide 0.5 half-cent sales and use tax for economic development purposes, and whereas ordinance number O-2010-9 extended the sunset provision of this tax for 10 years, and the tax is currently set to expire June 30th, 2023. Whereas the Quorum Court has determined that it would be in the best interest of the county to extend the levy of the tax until June 30th, 2033. Whereas the Planning and Development Committee has reviewed the matter and has agreed to send a resolution to extend the tax to the full court, and whereas the Quorum Court supports and approves the efforts of GREDA to extend the tax by special election. Now therefore be it further resolved by the Quorum Court of Mississippi County, Arkansas, GREDA's effort to extend the levy of the tax by special election until June 30th, 2003 are supported and approved.
Move for adoption.
Second.
Is there discussion?
Judge, this is simply a resolution of support in supporting the process of calling a special election eventually and extending the economic development tax out to 2033. We've got a little bit of time to work on this, but we do want to express our support, the support of Greta and the citizens committees that are being formed to push this. It does not call for this special election at this point. We anticipate maybe having an ordinance on the agenda in our April meeting that would actually call that special election if the Greta's efforts move forward as we expect them to.
Any other comments? Ms. Curry, would you call the roll?
Justice Ash?
Yes.
Justice Cullum?
Yes.
Justice Hinton?
Yes.
Justice Hepler?
Yes.
Justice Mangat?
Yes.
Justice McClanahan?
Yes.
Justice McDonald?
Yes.
Justice White?
Yes.
We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is a resolution to adopt the county safety plan. Ms. Curry, would you read the plan?
Resolution number R 2021-3. A resolution to adopt a new safety plan as revised and recommended by the Office of Emergency Management. Whereas a new safety plan has been drafted so to effectuate the revisions of Mr. Wayne Reynolds and now comes before this court. Whereas the revisions of Mr. Reynolds contemplate two additions to the plan. First, injured employees are now placed on light duty. Second, the plan now promulgates the substantive law and procedure with which substantive law and procedure with respect to inspections within the county. Whereas these revisions were made by the Office of Emergency Management and the plan approved by the Fire, Police, and Safety Committee. Now therefore be it further resolved by the Quorum Court of Mississippi County, Arkansas, the proposed 2021 safety plan for Mississippi County is adopted.
Move for adoption.
Second.
Is there discussion?
Judge, this is simply the safety plan we talked about. Wayne should provide copies to everyone after we pass this so that we can put it into effect for countywide.
Any other comments? Ms. Curry?
Justice Ash?
Yes.
Justice Cullum?
Yes.
Justice Hinton?
Yes.
Justice Hepler?
Yes.
Justice Mangat?
Yes.
Justice McClanahan?
Yes.
Justice McDonald?
Yes.
Justice White?
Yes.
We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, and that's under ordinances. The first one is an appropriation ordinance to reconcile the budget. Ms. Curry?
Appropriation ordinance number O 2021-7. An ordinance providing supplemental appropriations for the operation of Mississippi County government, including increases and/or changes in appropriations for certain departments of county government for the calendar and fiscal year of 2020 and for other purposes. Where it is necessary that certain adjustments be made regarding revenues and appropriations of county funds for the operation of Mississippi County government during the calendar fiscal year of 2020, with original appropriations in some instances to be modified to cover expenses for the county government during the year of 2020. Whereas the needed changes in appropriations have been set forth in a schedule dated and signed by the appropriate officers and employees of Mississippi County government and filed in the office of the county court clerk as required by law. Whereas the county court is authorized by law to alter, amend, and change the original appropriations made for the operation of county government during the calendar year of 2020 to provide final appropriations And whereas the final appropriations for specific offices and agencies of county government require changes and adjustments between the several offices and its agencies. Now therefore be it enacted by the Quorum Court of Mississippi County, Arkansas, that one, the 2020 budget for the operation of certain offices and departments of Mississippi County government be are revised and amended as provided in the revised 2020 budget attached hereto as an exhibit and incorporated herein by reference. 2, all appropriations previously authorized, approved, and made as to all the other offices, departments, and agencies of county government, and all other funds not hereinabove changed are to remain as previously appropriated. Detailed provisions of said appropriations are reflected in the schedule of specific items listed by account numbers within the category for each office and filed in the office of the county court clerk. 3, this ordinance, if any provision of the ordinance is held invalid, such invalidity shall not affect other provisions. This ordinance is hereby declared to be severable for such purposes. 4, this ordinance being an appropriation ordinance shall be in full force and effect immediately from and after its passage and approval by the county judge.
Move for adoption.
Second.
Is there discussion? Ms. Curran?
Justice Ash?
Yes.
Justice Cullen?
Yes.
Justice Hinton?
Yes.
Justice Hepler?
Yes.
Justice McGath?
Yes.
Justice McClanahan?
Yes.
Justice McDonald?
Yes.
Justice White?
Yes.
We'll move on to the next ordinance of bidding and contracting process. Ms. Curran?
Ordinance number O-2021-8. Be it enacted by the Quorum Court of Mississippi County, State of Arkansas, an ordinance to be entitled an ordinance ensuring an open and transparent bidding and contracting process. Now therefore be it enacted by the Quorum Court of Mississippi County, State of Arkansas, that 1, ensuring that bid information shall be placed online allows residents to know how their county government is conducting business and spending their tax money. Transparency is essential to building public trust and ensuring citizens are informed. 2, all bids as required by statute shall be posted on the county website, shall include the following: bid, RFD title, bid, RFP documents and description, date posted, due date, all bidders and bid information to include winning company bidder, bid amounts, initial contract period, renewal time frame. 3, all of the information required in the above section shall be posted within 10 working days of final bid award.
Judge, this is a regular ordinance and as such would require 3 readings. And I apologize that we didn't talk about this in committee meeting. We should have. In emergency situations or with the attachment of emergency clause, we normally move or advance to the second and third reading by title only, and we can pass it tonight under those circumstances, or we simply wait and read it the second time and then the third time at consecutive meetings.
I have no request for that unless this body wants to move to that. We're not in any great hurry. We're constantly working on this. I'm going to leave it to you all's discretion.
If you don't have any, we'll just wait and read it the second time, and if for some reason or other we see the need to expedite it next month, and we can go ahead and move to the third reading. So in that case, then this simply passes to next month's agenda for the second reading.
Is there any discussion? I would like to add that this has been a very long endeavor for Mr. Savage and myself, and I've passed out a handout. These are just our rough notes on where we want to be at some point. Some of these may be removed, and we may have some others that are added to it. But right now, this is our goal, and it looks like it's going to be quite a challenge, and it's going to be a lot of information. But I did want y'all to look at it, and then if you have anything that you might add, that you would add to it that would make us more transparent, I would we'd really be glad to hear it. Any other comments or questions? I don't think so. I think we just go on it now, and then it comes back to it. Well, is that not correct? Would you call the roll?
Justice Ash,
Yes.
Justice Cullum,
Yes.
Justice Hinton,
Yes.
Justice Hepler,
Yes.
Justice Mangat,
Yes.
Justice McClanahan,
Yes.
Justice McDonald,
Yes.
Justice White.
Yes.
We'll move to the next ordinance. It is the County Board Transparency Report. It's in addition to the one we just passed. It's gonna help make our county more transparent, get information back out to the people. Mr. Curry?
Ordinance number O 2021-9, being enacted by the Quorum Court of Mississippi County, State of Arkansas, an ordinance to be entitled County Board Transparency Report Ordinance. Whereas the citizens of Mississippi County expect transparent county government, it is imperative to publish reports of all boards that require a public appointment which conduct business that is vital to county operations. Whereas the citizens of Mississippi County need to be able to view all opportunities for public service so that they can have adequate time to apply and understand requirements to serve their fellow citizens on county boards. Now therefore be it enacted by the Quorum Court of Mississippi County, Arkansas, that A, all boards shall be posted on the Mississippi County website to include but not limited to 1, Equalization Board, 2, Library Board, 3, Public Facilities Board, 4, Election Commission, 5, Blythe-Gosnell Regional Airport Authority, 6, Hospital Board, 7, Economic Development Board, 8, Solid Waste Management District, 9, Law Library Osceola, 10, Law Library Board, Blythe. B, each board shall have the following information posted: ordinance of law creating committee, 2, purpose of the board, 3, applicable state laws that govern each board, 4, requirements for those serving on the board, 5, pay amount if applicable, 6, board member information such as A, names, phone number, email address, and address of each member. B, who appoints the members. C, term information such as date appointed and when term expires. C, the board vacancy shall be posted on the county website for 1 month to allow applications from citizens of Mississippi County. And D, the board information shall be updated after a new appointment has been made and/or at a minimum annually.
Judge, this fits the same description as the previous ordinance and requires 3 readings. And again, I'll make the same offer. Apology for one, that we didn't talk about it in the committee meeting, but also whether we need to attach the emergency clause and advance it or hold it over for the second reading on at our next meeting.
Thank you, Justice White. No, I don't believe that there's a necessity to do that. Certainly, emergency doesn't exist, so my thoughts are on it that we'll go ahead and move this to the
Move it to the second reading at the next meeting, and I'd make that motion.
But this one did go for committee.
Ma'am?
This one did go for committee.
Yeah, both of them
Oh.
did.
Okay.
It's
I
just
thought
we
you
didn't
said
talk
it did.
about
Okay.
whether we needed to
Okay.
expedite it and move it to the second and third reading.
Okay.
Second motion.
A voice vote, would that be suffice? Or do we want to call a roll?
Call roll would be safe.
All right.
Justice Ash,
Yes.
Justice Cullum,
Yes.
Justice Hinton,
Yes.
Justice Hepler,
Yes.
Justice Mangat,
Yes.
Justice McClanahan,
Yes.
Justice McDonald,
Yes.
Justice White.
Yes.
That's to move the second reading to next month. Is there discussion before we vote on the ordinance? And I'll add to it, just like we did the previous ordinance, I think these are one of the best things that the Quorum Court can do to be able to communicate with the public and the voters. And it is our intentions to be as transparent, actually, it's our intentions to be the most transparent county in the state of Arkansas. That's our goal. And University of Central Arkansas that monitors the counties. And it's very extensive, and they produce a report every year. And so that is Mr. Savage's and our goal is to be to be in that report is the most transparent county. Any other comments? Mr. Curry? Would you call?
What are we voting on here, Judge?
Well, that last vote was the vote to.
Just to move it to the second reading at the next meeting.
Right. This is the vote.
I think according to the rules, you read it, you only vote.
We're just gonna read it, we don't vote.
Yeah.
So we'll move to the next item on the agenda. And that is new business. I also gave out a handout on the concerns of the landfill, and it's for Riggs equipment and a piece of equipment from Caterpillar. It's a D6 bulldozer that needs to be replaced, and I wanted to hand that out at this meeting so everyone will be aware of what we're doing, especially the solid waste committee, and that's going to come up, Ms. George,
Monday.
Monday afternoon. So you'll already be presented with this and be able to look over it, and we'll see exactly what route we're going to go. Basically, we're going to discuss whether we make an outright purchase or whether we go into a lease agreement and some of the other particulars in that. Any other new business? If not, we'll move to the announcements. Mr. Reynolds, do you have an announcement for us?
Yes. Want to point out that tomorrow there are 2 COVID-19 vaccination events. One in the morning in Osceola at the City Hall from 9 a.m. to noon. The other is in Blyville at the New St. Paul Missionary Baptist Church on Sawyer Street, and that goes from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. And look this up real quick. The folks who are eligible, phase 1C is open, which means if you're aged 16 to 64 with health conditions that increase the risk for severe COVID, essential workers in energy, finance, food service, information technology and communications, government, and people residing in high-risk settings are all eligible for vaccination.
Do they have to have an appointment?
It would be helpful, and I posted that link earlier on my Twitter, and I can look that up.
If they don't have, can they show up and hope?
Yes. Yes, and if somebody has canceled their appointment, because once that vial is opened and touched, it has to be used. And they prefer to use it on somebody who didn't have an appointment rather than waste it.
Is this the first shot?
Say again?
The first shot?
Yes, yes, it is.
First, yes. And they'll give you your appointment for your second shot.
A lot of times if you'll call and they don't have it full, just in case, they will take your name so that they can call you to show up.
Correct.
If you can do it on short notice.
Any other announcements? Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to adjourn?
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Cindy, did you say there's a solid waste meeting Monday?